today we're going to be doing a budget Lexi deck tech, and this is going to be a no fuse Blitz variation. I have done two no fuse Blitz Lexi deck techs before. It is more or less my favorite deck in the entire game. I've been playing it for years at this point and updating it and reiterating on it, and I think I know the deck pretty well. And here we have the budget version, and as you can see, we're trying to keep this under $100. This is the challenge that I set for myself. Can I make a good budget deck under $100 and make it feel good and playable and still have really strong cards? And the answer is yes. Yes, we have, and I think this deck is excellent. I will have links to both this deck and my No Fuse 3.0 list in the description down below. And here's the No Fuse 3.0 list, by the way. This one, as you can see here, is a little bit more than $80. This one is $1,570. And there's a couple reasons for that. Most of the price is lumped into several cards. And what we're going to do here is we're going to do a full deck tech on the No Fuse budget version, and then I'm going to kind of show you the differences between the decks. And as you can see here, as I flip between the two lists, you can see there's not a ton of differences just at initial glance here, especially when you look at the hero equipment and loadout, right? You can see that I keep the same loadout except for the headpiece, New Horizon, which is in itself more than $100. So yeah, this is going to be a fun video. I know budget is something a lot of people are concerned about these days, and I feel you, Flesh and Blood is not a cheap game. So let's talk about a budget list that you could bring to your locals that I think is still like really good. It's still really good. I would feel comfortable playing this at locals, just for fun, right? So let's talk about it. So this is my no fuse budget version. As you can see here, the loadout is pretty standard, right? We have Voltaire. We're not sacrificing power when it comes to a lot of these cards. Voltaire is just amazing. One of the cards that makes Lexi even playable, in my opinion, and really makes this deck hum. We're actually using the Vest of the First Fist instead of Fiendo Spring Tunic, and that's because this card gives us 2 resources on the turn where it really matters. And Tunic can give us maybe 2 resources over the course of the entire game, whereas Vest gives it all at once. The big loss on Tunic is honestly the 1 block that the Tunic gives us, but in my, no budget version, I still run Vest of the First Fist. I do have Tunic down here in my sideboard just in case, especially if I need a block, but I run Vest in my deck, and I think it is very, very good. You get a resource when an attack action you control hits, and or you get 2 resources when an attack action you control hits, and that is insanely good when you're firing a bunch of arrows. 2 resources basically pays for another Voltaire activation and a 1-drop arrow. So this is just like a free thing that you get to do. You get to fire off another arrow for free, which is super, super good. Snapdragon Scalers I run in both lists. We actually have a little bit of a sideboard here, so you also have Perch Grapplers here, which is only like a couple bucks. It's like $5 to $8 or something like that. So it does still fit into our budget. And you basically only bring in the Perch Grapplers against decks where you really need to block. Otherwise, you're going to be going face, and you're not going to care all that much. This is Blitz. You want to kill your opponent before they can do much to you. And so that's what Snapdragon Scalers are good for those really, really go wide turns. And it's also great in particular for something like Snatch here, which is not an arrow, so we cannot give it go again with Voltaire. We are running the Quiver of Rustling Leaves in both decks. This card is just a free include into any of our decks. We're not running the other one, I forget what it's called, the Sunken Depths one, because we do not plan on going to Fatigue at all or anything like that. This one is really good for making sure our 3-of-a-kind draws are good, that we hit on our 3-of-a-kind draws. In fact, the budget version of this deck is more resilient to bad 3-of-a-kind draws, which is kind of funny because we're running the Mask of Malicious Manifestations, which says, action, you get to put a card from your hand or arsenal, which is very important, on the bottom of your deck. Destroy the mask, then reveal cards from the top of your deck until you hit an attack action card, and you put it in your hand, then you shuffle the deck and it has to go again. It also has Blade Break. So this is really good for those 3-of-a-kind whiff turns, right? Where you can, if you play your 3-of-a-kind, you draw no arrows at all, you can still at least pitch one of those, hopefully a blue card, So you can float some resources and then go get an arrow. So you're at least guaranteed an arrow off of a 3 of a kind turn. So that's what this is really, really good for. The thing we lose out on is New Horizon and the 2 arsenal zones that this gives you. But honestly, I found that you don't need it all that much in Blitz because you're just going to be shooting a ton of arrows all the time. It's a little bit of a loss, but it's one that we have to deal with because New Horizon is just a very, very expensive card. And then we run Bullseye Bracers. It's just Bullseye Bracers. You destroy it, you put a card from your hand, or an arrow from your hand face up into your arsenal and gets +1 for the turn, which is great. It also has Arcane Barrier. We're also running 2 more pieces of Arcane Barrier, so we can hit that Arcane Barrier 3, so we don't immediately lose to Kano. We have an okay number of blues, not a ton of blues. We have a fourth of the deck are blue. We have 10 blues in this deck, whereas in my no budget version, we have 11, so it's pretty close. The ratios are pretty close between the two. And then obviously we have Lexi. This is a no fuse list, so we're not going to be worried about fusing at all, but we do have cards that are ice and or lightning, or ice or lightning. We don't have and or. Ice or lightning that we're going to be using her ability for, so that is really good. So keep that in mind. As any good Lexi list, we're running a bunch of Bolt and Shots. This card is insanely good, one of the best cards in the deck, and it's really cheap. So you run it. This is just one of your best arrows you can hope to get. We're not going to go over every single card in detail because I'm going to assume that you know what most of these cards do. If you don't, you can check out the links down below and review the cards in your own time. We have Drill Shot. I think Drill Shot is a fantastic new addition, well, ever since Dynasty. It's just a nice 0 for 4 with a really good on-hit effect. We don't really care about the aim counter thing, which is like the piercing 1. We just care about like the fact that it attacks for 4, and then if it hits, you got to put a -1 counter on an equipment they control, which also basically makes it attack for 5, right? Giving a -1 on a piece of equipment that they would otherwise block with reduces their virtual health by 1. So this is a very strong card, almost a 0 for 5, virtually. Endless Arrow is just a staple. It's incredibly good, one of the most powerful arrows in my opinion. 0 for 4, if it hits, comes back in your hand. And then you can keep playing it because we're Lexi, right? And we can give it go again. So you can do some really nasty stuff with this card and Voltaire, especially if you combine this with stuff like Rain Razors down here, which is just a 0, and you give +2 to all of your arrows while they're attacking this turn. Like I said, this is a budget list. This is only 80 bucks, but we still have some of the best cards in the deck. Right, we're still running Rain Razors. We're still running 3 of a kind. We still have stuff like Codex of Bloodrot, which I think is super underrated for Lexi. I think Codex of Bloodrot is incredibly good in this deck. I think it might be better than Frailty. So we'll talk about that. We're also running Heat Seeker in this deck. I can't run this in my version of the deck because my version, my budgetless version, actually runs like Fabled cards. And the downside of having the Fabled cards is that if you put a Fabled card from the top of your deck into your arsenal, well, then you're kind of just screwed, right? You do have one way to get rid of it. You do have your mask here, but we're not running any Fableds because of that. So yeah, this is just great. If it hits your opponent, you get to put a card from your deck face up into your arsenal. Super good. You just get to prep a card for your next turn. Infecting Shot is just a lot of damage, 1 for 5. We don't care about the aim counters, just gives them a Bloodrot Pox if it hits. We're also running Withering Shot, same kind of deal, 1 for 5. And if it hits, we get a Frailty. You can swap this out depending on your metagame, right? You can put the Inertia one instead. I like the Frailty one because we don't block very well. So giving them a -1 is just nice for us. Sleep Dart is really good against some heroes and worthless against others. It will basically kill Levia if it hits Levia, if you are playing against the Levia. But against a lot of other heroes, it's also very, very strong. Like Dromai, for example. Just a really, really good card. And it's a 1 for 5. We want to have a lot of arrows in the deck to maximize our Rain Razors. And, you know, that just makes stuff like Bolt and Shot that much better. I want to comment on Bolt and Shot again, just real quick. It's so good. Just the fact that it gets go again if its attack is bigger is just incredibly good. You always give it +1 with Voltaire. You don't even bother with the go again because it'll get go again anyway. And then it'll also get go again from your Bullseye Bracers. Bolt and Shot is amazing, amazing workhorse. We're also running Snatch in this deck. I don't run the Snatch in my other deck. I run basically Enlightened Strike instead, and for budget reasons, we're not including Enlightened Strike, but that's not to say that Snatch isn't good. Snatch is very good. It's a 0 for 4 on-hit draw card, so it has that really nice breakpoint, and then also draws you a card. You can use that in conjunction with your Snapdragon Scalers to have another really wide turn, or you can just draw that card and then arsenal it so you have a bigger turn next turn. A perfect card for that, by the way, we're going to skip ahead, are the 6 cantrips. So one thing that this deck does really well, that I like more than some other aggro decks, is this deck draws a lot of cards. We have stuff like 3 of a kind, which we'll talk about in its own respect. And then we have all our 6 cantrips. So we're running Polar Blast, Electrify, and Cold Snap. Now they all have the same text. If they're played from Arsenal, you draw a card, and then they have Go again. But they also have this other effect. So like Cold Snap has the opposing hero can pay 1. If they don't, you get to freeze a card in their arsenal or an ally. Electrify has the next time an attack action card hits this turn, it deals an extra damage to your opponent. And then the Polar Blast gives your next attack Dominate if they don't pay 1. But what's so good about all these cards is they draw you a card when played from Arsenal, and they give you extra value when they're turned face up with Lexi's hero ability, which says turn a face down card in your arsenal face up. If it's a lightning card, your next attack gets Go again. And if it's an ice card, you give them a frostbite token. And so we have 4 ice cards and then the two lightning cards here with Electrify. And it's just so good value. Turning up an ice card, giving your opponent a frostbite token, playing it, hopefully pitching a yellow or blue card, floating a couple resources, drawing a card to replace it, and you're playing this, from your arsenal, right? Hopefully that you did in the previous turn, or with either Codex of Bloodrot or Codex of Inertia. We'll talk about those in just a second. And then you get like this really great value of 4 cards in your hand, 2 resources floating if you pitched a blue, and then you can just continue to pop off. The cantrips are very good. I love these cards, and I think it really makes the deck hum and feel much better. It smooths out your draws, just really nice. And then we have Headshot as another blue. It's just a 1 for 4 essentially when it's put into your arsenal. If it's your last arrow, for example, if you need to fire it off, you can give it +1 with Voltaire, and it becomes a 1 for 5 blue. Really nice. I'm a big fan of the blue Headshot. Other cards in the deck. We'll talk about Amplifying Arrow real quick. I think this card's way better than it looks. It's a 0 for 2, but if it would get any pumps, it gets that much +1. So at the base level, if that's the last arrow you're firing off, if you give it +1 from Voltaire, it gets +2, right? If you give it +1 from Bullseye Bracers, it gets +2. For Rain Razors, it gets +3, right? So if you are firing off an Amplifying Arrow on a big turn, right? Your Amplifying Arrow, maybe it's the last arrow you're firing off, on a Rain Razor's turn, it gets +3 from Rain Razors, and then +2 from Voltaire. That's a +5 total, coming in for 7, 0 for 7, right? That's like not bad. And what makes it like pretty good, or better than it would seem, is that it also pitches for yellow, which is a crucial amount in this deck. As you can see, everything we have costs either 1 or 0, and we need another 1 to filter it through Voltaire, so 2 is the sweet spot to fire off most of our big arrows, like your Heat Seekers or Infecting Shots. I kind of skipped over Pathing Helix. It's just kind of like another Bolton Shot. It's like a worse Bolton Shot. It's all right. I put this in my actual deck as well. It's just, like I said, more Bolton Shots, basically. All right, so let's talk about some of the spicy stuff, right? I think the cantrips are spicy. 3 of a kind. 3 of a kind is what makes Lexi really good, in my opinion, and we can fit it in our budget. And in my opinion, you just kind of need to play it. It's so good. Draw 3 cards, and you can only play cards from your arsenal, which, it doesn't matter. We're just going to be shooting your opponent with a bunch of arrows and Voltaire. You can, even use Bullseye Bracers on a 3 of a kind turn to fire even more arrows off. And like I said, we have a lot of ways to get around this if we don't draw arrows with either Quiver of Rustling Leaves or the Mask of Malicious Manifestations. So we have much more redundancy, less of a risk when we fire off our 3 of a kind. And then we're running 2 codices, right? So Codex of Bloodrot, in my opinion, is incredibly good in Blitz Lexi. And then we'll talk about Inertia as well. We're not including Frailty because it doesn't fit in the budget. I think Frailty is an amazing card, and in my no budget version, I'm running Codex of Frailty. But in this version, well, we don't have the budget for it. So we're going to be running Inertia, which I think is still really good. So Blood Rot, the reason I think Blood Rot is so good in this deck is because it pairs with our cantrips amazingly. All right, so Blood Rot says, each hero puts a card from their hand face down into the arsenal. Your opponent gets a Blood Rot, you get a Ponder, which is great for, first of all, your opponent gets a Blood Rot. They're mostly going to take the 2 damage. You get a Ponder, which is great, so you can set up your next turn. But also, you put a card from your hand face down into your arsenal, and you want to put any one of our cantrips face down, because what you do, the idea is, you put the cantrip face down into your arsenal, then you turn it face up with Lexi's ability, right? Getting the benefit, either Go Again, maybe you can give your Snatch Go Again or something like that, if it's an Electrify, or giving them a Frostbite token, then you play it, draw the card from it, right? And you get that cantrip effect, and then just continue to pop off, and your opponent had to put a card from their hand into their arsenal if they didn't already have an arsenal, or a card in their arsenal. So that rips a card out of their hand, gives them a Blood Rot, gives you a Ponder, and hopefully you can play on a turn that you have one of our 6 cantrips. It is super, super good. Like, it is so much value. It feels so good. When you play it, just, oh, it feels great. And then Inertia is a little tricky. It just says each player puts the top card of their deck face down into the arsenal. Each hero that does discards a card. So for this one, you have to discard a card. And then it says create a Ponder token under your control, and your opponent gets an Inertia token, which is good against some classes, good against opposing rangers, good against wizards, especially like Icelander. And then putting any card from the top of the deck into the arsenal can be good, especially if you can like kind of goozle your opponent, putting like their Eye of Ophidia or something into that, just so they can't play it. And it's just like stuck on their arsenal. But yeah, I think Codex of Inertia is pretty good. The discarding a card is rough, but you're probably discarding a card that you don't need for that turn. Other cool things you can do with this deck on this is just generally with Lexi on 3 of a kind turns. If you have a 3 of a kind in your hand as well as a Rain Razors, play the Rain Razors first, because Rain Razors doesn't need a target. It just says your arrows have +2 while attacking this turn, so you can just play your Rain Razors out and then play your 3 of a kind and hope you draw into some gas to just fire a ton of arrows off at your opponent. What other things? Endless Arrow is super, super good, especially on 3 of a kind turns, and especially if your opponent blocks with something, blocks a lot with something else first. So a great tip is to either start off with a semi-threatening arrow that your opponent probably wants to block, either something like a Drill Shot, Heat Seeker, or even maybe a Bolton Shot. Your opponent's like, oh no, I don't want to give him the reload. Maybe I should block a bunch. And then you want to kind of end with your Endless Arrow so it has the best chance to hit. And if it does, then you can kind of pop off, especially if you've got like Bullseye Bracers still active, or if you have your Vest active, so you can crack it and then do some more shenanigans or something like that. And yeah, that's essentially the deck. It's an aggro deck. You draw a lot of cards. We have a lot of cards that just say draw a card on them. We have our 4 codices that have the Ponder tokens. We have 3 of a kind. We have Snatch, and we have our 6 cantrips. This deck is very, very fun to play and does not feel weak at all. And the things that you're losing, they're strong, right? But they're not like so how do I put this? They're not so debilitating that you lose them, right? So what do we lose here? You lose the New Horizon. We lose Premeditate, which is a +3, and you get a Ponder token. Let's see, what else do I also lose out on? You lose on the Codex of Frailty, which is great for redundancy on the arrows, getting your arrows back. It's always really nice. We also lose on Remorseless. I think this is probably the first upgrade I would make if you wanted to upgrade the the budget version. These Remorselesses would take the budget version up to about $110, right? They cost about $15 each, and so it would add about another $30 on there. But they're really good, 1-for-5s with a really good evasion effect and a really good on hit. I'm a huge fan of Plague Hive. It's a little jank, but a lot of fun, and I really like the fun factor of it. You don't really need it in the deck. Another big money maker is the Eye of Ophidia. Eye of Ophidia is incredible in this deck because it pairs with 3 of a kind very, very well. You present the 3 of a kind, then you pitch for it. You pitch Eye of Ophidia, opt 2, and then you get to see what cards you're going to be drawing, and if they suck, you put them on the bottom. Or if they're arrows and they're going to be good, you leave them on top. Ivophidia and Three of a Kind are fantastic together, but Ivophidia is a really, really, really expensive card, and you don't need it. It's nice to have, but you don't need it. The big money cards that I think are legit upgrades for this would be the Premeditate, Frailty, and the Remorseless. Of course, we have the New Horizon, which is worth $100 to a couple $100, depending on what version you get. And in fact, we can look. What does this say? It is $200 for the rainbow foil. Wait, it's so close. Why would you not get the rainbow foil? Or why would you not get the gold foil if it's only like a $40 difference? Anyway, New Horizon is very expensive. It is a very good card, but I think you can manage without it in a Blitz list, because Blitz games aren't going to last that long, and you're not going to have a ton of opportunities to make use of that double arsenal. And I think the Mask of Malicious Manifestations here still gives you good value, right? Yeah, it's still really nice. I think it's very good. Other things you lose out on, Quiver of Abyssal Depths, only a $15 card. If you think you're going to go to Fatigue, I think it's, you could pick it up. But I almost never go to Fatigue with this deck. Van Braces is really good against like defensive heroes, especially like Oldhim. But once again, I don't think it's that needed. And then the Tunic is like, I think there's an argument here that Vest might be as good or better than Tunic in this Blitz version, right? We're not going to have that many turns. How many turns do you need to get 2 resources off of Tunic, right? 6? You need 6 turns. I would say most Blitz games with this particular deck, since it's an aggro deck, don't really go to 6 turns unless your opponent's really going like a Fatigue route. And Vest will give you 2 resources when you need it on a turn where you can just burst them down. So all in all, like these are like the big cards that you're swapping out on. The Codexes, the Remorseless, and the Premeditates. And honestly, I think this version of the deck is still quite good. I highly recommend it, and for $80, I think it is a great way to get into Flesh and Blood, to start playing a strong deck at your locals. If you're going to be playing, you know, at the Callings, at top tier events, you might want to upgrade into a more streamlined deck. Not necessarily this one. This one's kind of crazy. I'm just throwing in all my fun, expensive stuff. Honestly, you don't need the Fableds, but and that would knock off you know, $700 or something like that. But still, I recommend trying it out. And yeah, let me know if you like this video. Let me know if you'd like to see more budget deck content. I want to make the budget decks good, right? I don't want to present to you a budget deck that I think is like, you know, here's a cheap deck and it sucks. I want to be like, here is an affordable deck that I still think is really good and has the essence of what makes the deck what it is. And to me, for No Fuse Lexi, it's going to be Three of a Kinds and Rain Razors. These are kind of like the 2 really big power cards. And you have stuff like Endless Arrow, you have your Bolton Shots, you even have your Codex of Blood Route, which I already went over why I think this card is amazing in this version of Lexi. You have your Cantrips. Like, this deck is so much fun to play, even with like this more budget version. So let me know what you think in the comments down below, and we'll see you next time.